We have Beneke, Mr. Glider. We have Ahmed. And then we have Carol Kendrick from the planning department online.
Mr. Glider?
Yes, Chris Glider. I need to update my my committee members on.
Good afternoon. We're going to call the Beaumont Economic Development Committee to order at 4:02. Let me say welcome to everyone. Again, good evening to you. At this time, I'm going to ask Ms. Wheelwright to call the roll, please.
Mayor Lloyd White.
Here.
Councilmember Lara.
Here.
Interim City Manager Gibbs. She was going to try to attend. She's out of town, but she's not here at the moment. ED Manager Kyle Rosinski.
Here.
Chairman Lawson.
Present.
Vice Chair Betty Rader is absent. Member Ahmed.
Here.
Member Beneke.
Here.
Member Brown. Member Copeland stated he would be absent this afternoon. Member Moran. Member Vince. And Member Glider.
Here.
Thank you, Ms. Wheelwright. Are there any actions or any requests for excused absences other than those mentioned?
Committee Chair, I believe Member Moran had let me know that he had a conflict. He's at, I believe it's a Cal Ed conference this week.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mr. Warsinski. At this time, I'm going to ask if you would, Mr. Warsinski. Oh, well, we've had Member Evan Brown to enter. Get your breath about yourself, Member Brown. I'm going to ask humbly if you would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, sir. How are you, Dr. Brown?
Fantastic.
All right.
Please
You'll join. Good to see you, sir. As always.
Raise your hand over your heart. Ready to begin?
Allegiance to the flag of the United
United
States
States
of
of
America
America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. At this time, if we could, are there any adjustments to the agenda, Ms. Wheelwright?
I believe there was a request to move item 6 up after item 1. Is that what you were looking for?
Yes, please.
After item 1. Noted. Any additional adjustments? Hearing none at this time, we'll ask, are there any conflicts of interest that need to be disclosed? Any conflicts of interest? Conflicts of interest, hearing none. At this time, we're going to ask that you would, or we would acknowledge or listen for any public comment. Ms. Wheelwright, do we have any public comments that need to be made?
I have no written comments. Heather, do we have anyone on the line?
No, we do not.
All right. Hearing no public comments, Ms. Warsinski, I know you'd asked this young man if he wanted to address us
Yes,
prior
sir.
to.
Committee Chair, I believe that discussion as it relates to the downtown vision and downtown plan would
Yes, sir.
more be appropriate under item 6. So that's why staff had asked the chair and the committee to be able to move that up to after approval of the minutes.
Fantastic. Well, I just heard that, and I wanted to make sure we got that young man up if he needed to have a conversation. Then hearing no public comments at this time, we'll ask that you would review the minutes. If you've already reviewed the minutes, and give you a couple of minutes to do that. That said, I'll entertain a motion to approve or amend as needed. Floor is open.
I'll motion.
I'll second.
It has been moved and properly second that we would accept the minutes as they have been presented. Ms. Wheelwright, will you please call the roll?
Member White?
Yes.
Member Lara?
Yes.
Member Wardzinski?
Yes.
Chairman Lawson?
Yes.
Member Ahmed?
Yes.
Member Beneke?
Abstain. I wasn't at the last meeting.
Member Brown?
Yes.
Member Glider?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wheelwright. At this time, I am going to defer to Mr. Warsinski to address item 6, which is continued discussion on downtown business and landowners to promote business growth and development in the Central Business District. Mr. Warsinski.
Thank you, committee chair, members of the committee. So this obviously is an item that's going to continue on future agendas. Tonight's presentation will involve some of the parking strategies discussion that has occurred at prior meetings, as well as our community development director will be presenting a couple different options for the committee to think about and potentially make a recommendation to city council on some of those changes. But before we got to that, we do have a member of the public that would like to speak on some downtown-related issues. He is one of the local landowners within the downtown area. And we had a meeting was it a week ago or so, and he had identified something that he would like to bring to the committee's attention. So I'll go ahead and kick it over to John Aaron.
Fantastic. And tell us your name again, young man. John Aaron, and the last name? Mr. Leonard. Mr. Leonard, I'm a Southern boy, so we put a little respect on the name. Come on up and join us, young man, please.
Hi, we're local developers in town, and we own a number. Sure. We're local developers in town, and we own a number of properties in the city. I think we have 7 or 8 on 6th Street that we own. And, we're very impressed with the city's vision, and we'd like to be a part of it. I guess our only reservation right now is that we're not seeing a monetary commitment by the city to the project. And what we don't want is to come in and start building these mixed-use or multifamily buildings and be the only developer in town doing it. One new mixed-use building isn't going to bring any more traffic into town. If we have a whole block or 2 of them, we're going to see a significant, increase in traffic. So we'd like to see more developers on board and mostly a commitment by the city to the project, a monetary commitment.
Let me ask this first before I ask a question. Are there any questions from committee members? Because I'd be curious to know more if you would define what you mean by mixed facility or mixed building.
Well, just storefront on the bottom, units on top.
Okay.
Yeah. Whatever's aligned with the city's vision, really.
So we're not talking residential, we're talking,
Or apartment buildings. We have some apartment buildings in town as well.
questions from committee members, please?
Yeah, I do.
Yes, sir.
How's that? So first of all, let me assure you the city is behind this, but this forum here is to get information from you,
Sure.
business owners and property owners, on how we can encourage you and do exactly what you're asking for. So do you have an idea, maybe your experience with other cities, on how the city of Beaumont could make a financial commitment? I mean, tell me what you're thinking. We're brainstorming here, so.
Well, what I was thinking is a commitment, like you have this vision for this project.
Right.
But there's no monetary commitment towards that project yet, right? Unless I'm wrong.
Yeah, the way the council's looking at this is that the design, the general plan all sets us up to eventually get to some point. And that point, in my opinion, is 10 to 15 years out, which is way too long. So what we've tried to do this year, and this is why I'm glad you came in, is we're trying to figure out how we get more people, more developers to come here now rather than wait to 10 to 15 years. So what we're going to talk about tonight is parking strategies, because we know for some businesses, parking is a deal killer.
Sure.
And then we have other issues regarding permits. We have an ordinance in place on 6th Street, basically, that says if you buy a residential property and you turn it into retail or commercial, that when you sell it later, it cannot go back to residential. And the whole idea is we're trying to create a plan to go exactly where you and I want to go. So when you're asking, and I'm not at all saying we're not interested in doing it, I'm just trying to figure out what you mean by a way. I mean, how could we commit financially that would help you, other than, I mean, I think we already plan on doing marketing and that kind of stuff to try and draw and attract businesses here, but give me some idea, you know.
So let me ask you, when do you foresee actually breaking ground or starting improving or getting started with a plan?
Yeah, I know of one building, very close to here that we just learned, I think this week, is going to, redevelop an older building and turn it into a mixed use. So it would be commercial and they're hopeful looking at.
Which building was that?
I really can't say right now.
Oh, okay, sure.
But that's where we want to go. I assure you, we want to do this, but I use this as an example. I'm a software developer. I don't own a business. I don't own a property here. I don't know what you go through. I don't know what attracts you to come and help us build this vision. And that's where we need to get feedback from property owners, business owners. How can we make it happen faster? So
Sure.
I assure you, we want to do it. You know, some of the ideas that people have come up with is maybe the city could help with transitions of businesses from one kind to another that may need to come up with things like utilities and things that the old business doesn't need. Maybe we can help. You know, one of the suggestion, an idea, was that we could create a fund that would help new developers defer cost on some of those transitions.
Yeah.
So I think, and Mike Lara is also on our council too. I think we are open to any ideas, but for us to come up with those ideas, sure, the city staff could, but as you know, working with cities, if it comes from the city, it's not as meaningful as if it comes from the developers and the property owners. So that's
Yes.
why we're trying to have this discussion. I think this item will be on the agenda for in perpetuity. So,
Sure,
So if you have ideas, please bring them to us.
okay.
And some of the financial commitment that we've made is the streets, Beaumont Avenue as well as Sixth Street have recently been paved. Council, some time back, approved to improve the medians down Sixth Street as you head towards Highland Springs.
Okay,
So we do have financial commitment in trying to make improvements in the area so that it's more appealing. And again, we're investing staff time and money in doing the studies for the parking and trying to address things like that.
okay, great.
We committed to, what was it, a month ago where we had the business meeting. That was a great deal of staff time and investment. So there are those investments that we're trying to generate that interest to get this thing moving sooner rather than later.
Sure. We own a, sorry,
I was gonna say, and Chair, when I had met with John Aaron last week, we showcased him the downtown vision that we went over at the downtown business meeting, because he wasn't able to attend that meeting and he wasn't able to see that. And some of the discussions that we're having there was, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seemed like you were interested in the street improvement projects on slowing down speeds on Sixth Street with some of those new parking configurations and the traffic calming devices that are contained within that plan, because the plan calls for street improvements to be made to allow for angled parking, medians, those types of things. And I know during that discussion, he's like, well, are those funded improvements today, or when might landowners and developers expect to see those types of improvements within the downtown? So I know that's one thing that we had brought up.
we own a 507 East 6 and 525 and 533, and we just got a demo permit for 507, and we're gonna be building mixed use there. We might be raising 525 and 533 as well, but that's our plan right now.
That's currently right here in Beaumont.
Yeah, right on 6, 506, yeah.
One thing that is starting to take place is there are a couple of the people who were at the meeting, property owners as well as business owners, who are trying to form a core of a downtown business association. Our thought is that if we tell you as a city what you need to do, it doesn't have as much impact as opposed to you telling us what you need and what we need to do to move there. We talk also about Pennsylvania. We're going to widen Pennsylvania. That'll give us an opportunity to start seriously thinking about doing changes on Sixth Street. that'll bring some of the angled parking, some of the medians and things like that. So I assure you, we are committed to this. But again, if there's a way we can show the outside business world that we're really committed and it's a financial commitment, I don't think any of us on council are opposed to that. We just need
Okay.
ideas. You know, what is it that other cities might attract you? You know, why would you do business in another city versus our city based on how the city is?
We've always liked the city. We've owned here since the mid-nineties. We bought our first 40 units on Pennsylvania, I think 96. So we've been here for quite some time. But the city hasn't really grown, like Yucaipa, for example. We're doing a lot in Yucaipa right now, some developments in Yucaipa. But this city kind of almost looks the same as it did. I mean, it
You
looks
mean this area, the Sixth Street
Yeah,
downtown?
yeah.
Yeah.
And we just haven't seen a lot of growth. And when there's growth, there's more opportunity for us.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, we love the city. We like to build here more
We
But it
want
has
you
to make
build-
make
we want you
sense
to build more,
financially.
yeah.
Yeah. I've never worked with the city of Beaumont, so I'm not sure if the city's easy to work with. Yucaipa's very easy for us to work with. They help us to expedite the process for us. And are you relatively,
That's what we're trying to do. We recognize that there are hurdles.
Sure.
But no, my personal commitment and the rest of the council is on board with this, is that we get something moving now. We get something started, you know, it's the chicken and the egg. You know,
Yeah.
do we build the infrastructure before the developers come in and build what they need to build? I don't think that works.
Sure.
And you're telling me it doesn't work as well if you come in and build the buildings expecting us to build the infrastructure. So I think there's a way that we need to work with our downtown business owners. If you're comfortable with it and Kyle has your information, I'd love to put you in touch with
definitely,
a couple other people who are spearheading this group, because they're looking for property owners who can tell us what you need. You know, how can we get you and others to move and develop here?
sure. The other issue that we were looking at with Kyle was the floor area ratio. I don't know if that's something to bring up now or,
Please bring it up, because as the mayor alludes to, it's better if you tell us the issues on how it affects or positively or negatively what you found in the downtown plan, and then that way we hear it from you and can take actions to fix it.
well, based on the existing floor area ratio, doesn't make sense to build anything in this town.
Tell me what you mean by floor area ratio.
You can probably do it better than I can. I mean, it's how much you can build.
So, Chair, in the last couple of weeks or so, we've been talking to a couple developers within the downtown area, or prospective developers, and what we've come across is that the downtown plan has a floor area ratio, and what that is it's a planning term and it's a planning function in which when you develop a site, and we'll just use 10,000 square feet as a easy example, because my math skills are somewhat limited. But our current code says you can build, the floor area ratio is 0.35. So you can build on 35% of that lot with a building, not development, but a building. The
So there's
floor area,
6,500
so you'd
square
have
feet that you can't.
Footprint,
the footprint.
not
on-
square feet of whatever 2 or 3 story building.
No,
No.
the square feet is how it's done.
Okay.
So it's, on that, my example, you'd be able to build 3,500 square feet of a building on that 10,000 square foot lot under our current code. So staff's done a little quick research on other downtown areas. I looked at Redlands, theirs is 2, which represents multi-story. So you, on a 10,000 square foot lot, you could build 20,000 square feet of floor. And that's something that has come up with a prior landowner and developer, and it had come up with Mr. Leinhardt last week. And I wanted him to bring that to the council's, or the committee and the council's attention, that if we're asking, and we're hoping to entice developers to come and build multi-story buildings, if you wanted to build a 2-story building on that lot, it could only be 1,750 square feet times 2. And then the rest of the lot would be landscaping and parking and so forth. So we've identified that issue, and staff believes that we should be taking action to do that, but it's a lot easier to hear from how that negatively impacts a prospective developer or business owner at this committee.
So John, Aaron, Christina, could you sort of respond? And what I'm looking for from you is the process the council can go to reconsider this, how much of it's in the general plan that we, what's the process? Because I think it makes perfect sense. Why would you want to create 2 or 3 stories if it has to be that much smaller of a footprint?
Right. Yeah, so floor area ratio, like Kyle mentioned, is one of the things that we have been talking about as far as addressing within the downtown area plan. So just like any other amendment to a zoning code or the general plan, it would be initiated at either council's direction or at the staff level, and then we would carry it through planning commission and city council for consideration of that amendment. And then within, 30 days, it takes effect after the second reading. So it's another one of the things that we have the ability to adjust within the zoning code, just like with parking or with any of the other standards that we have. The reason that the floor area ratio is the way it is in the current downtown is because up until this point, downtown has been fairly low density. And so without trying to completely blow that out of the water, with the with the adoption of the new general plan and some of the zoning codes, we thought it would keep things relatively consistent. But now that we've really kind of captured the vision and we're hearing from businesses, this is one of those things that we can change. We can either eliminate floor area ratio, and actually a similar conversation to the parking recommendations that we'll see here in a bit, but we can increase it, we can eliminate it altogether and not worry about it. We can look at what other cities are doing and make recommendations based on types of uses, whether it's a commercial or a mixed use like Mr. Leonard's is talking about, or anything else. So we have options on how we want to handle it. Once we hear from businesses on what will work best for their different types of uses, that gives us a good gauge of which way we need to go.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions for Mr. Leonard? Any comments or questions? Mr. Leonard?
Yeah, I have a question.
Please, sir, go right ahead. Member Konecki?
Mr. Leonard, you said you actually own the land. You own the land in the downtown area that you're considering developing?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
You actually own the property in the downtown area that you're considering developing? You
Yes.
actually own the property?
Yeah, all the properties we're considering developing, we own.
You own the property. This is kind of an oddball question, but sometimes cities will ask property owners in a downtown area, or they'll define a specific area in downtown that they would like to have property owners buy into, like, let's say, a downtown revitalization investment authority. Establishing that authority then and basically it's like some kind of a tax assessment that would have to be figured out and determined. But what it does allow is that additional revenue that could be collected from that authority that would be established could then go ahead and purchase development bond money that would be available to people like yourself and or the city if it needed to have extra money to implement in a more rapid manner street improvements, streetscape designs and things of that nature. The reason I bring it up is I wasn't involved, but I was knowledgeable of an event that occurred in Sacramento on one particular boulevard, which is about 2 miles long. And the property owners there actually got together and formed such an authority, assessed themselves a tax. They went out and were able to bond for, I don't know, some $7 or $8, $10 million. And that was money that they then had available. And within 2 years, they had completed all kinds of fantastic projects that helped everybody in that whole area survive and prosper. So I don't know if that is something we'd be interested in, or I know you'd have to get other property owners to buy in, and it's a big ask, but that is a possibility. And since we're kind of exploring different ideas and possibilities, I thought I'd just mention it and see what your reaction might be to that.
No, I appreciate you mentioning it, and it sounds very interesting. I just would need to learn more about the process and in detail, obviously, what it entails. But I appreciate you suggesting it.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Any additional questions or comments for Mr. Leonard?
I just have a question. So I know that some downtown areas have like revitalization zones. And I'm not sure if that's, UKIPA's done something similar to that, but I know where this happens sometimes on the East Coast where people own property and let's say they're a little bit more, they're older properties, and so the city comes in, they define it as some sort of revitalization, they provide some revitalization funds to help the property owners and do some sort of split remodeling, in terms of splitting the cost. Does that happen, Kyle, in other cities? Is that something that we've been looking into, or?
It happened a lot more when cities had redevelopment agencies and that those areas can be considered blighted under the state code. That's not to say that cities aren't still doing those types of functions, but it's really just a matter of budgetary asks in terms of identifying budget for that type of item, and then getting the council to support that. And then also to get business or property owners to take advantage of that program. We had a facade improvement program many, many years ago, only related to the facades, and we had a decent amount of money allocated, but only one property owner took advantage of that program over the 3 or 4 years that it was enacted. And then, of course, it expired, and then a bunch of people wanted on board after that, but it was a little too late at that point in time. But council is looking at a similar type of program within the budget this upcoming budget season.
What do you mean by facades?
Like the outside of the building. So if
Okay.
you had an existing building and you were looking at improving what it looked like, the city would be able to possibly match funds
Sure.
to a certain point where we would team up to make the building look better.
Kyle,
Thank
this
you.
is Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Warsinski. I have a quick question, and by all means, I have no idea what I'm talking about, and I tell students all the time, learn how to play your position. I'm not in denial, that's a river in Africa, so I want to be very clear. When you start talking about a 10,000 square foot lot, and just out of curiosity, what size facility are you looking at building? Because you've said that you could only use roughly 35% of it. So what size facility would you be talking about trying to build if you didn't have?
Well, we do want to maximize the space.
So you'd look at the entire 10,000 square
Sure,
foot?
yeah.
So then how would we address the parking issue? Are you then looking at the improvements that
Sure.
you're planning to be made?
I guess that's the
Gotcha.
next discussion.
Gotcha, okay. I was just curious, like I said, I'm interested in this, in the fact that I do believe wholeheartedly that Beaumont is supportive of that growth, that development. Clearly, I know you had said you don't see the growth. Having moved here in 2014, while it might not have been downtown, as we go throughout this community, you can see enormous growth. Not only in business down on the First Street in that area and that corridor, but certainly in individuals that are moving to this community.
Sure.
I can't get around like I used to, that's for sure. I've learned all the back streets just so I can get my food home hot, when I pick it up. So absolutely, but yeah, certainly I know for a fact, listening to Mayor White and listening to Councilman Lahr and other public servants in this community, that they are definitely of support. So I was just curious to know that, but thank you very much.
Sure.
Are there any additional questions for Mr. Leonard, please? Comments, questions?
I just
This
want
is
to-
Chris.
Yes, sir, please, come through.
It's not really, well, the question is, I guess, for the gentleman, the speaker, is, did Kyle did you see a general plan or the economic development strategic plan?
We went through a
Have you seen that?
slideshow, if that's,
Yeah, member Glider, we didn't go over the EDSP, but we did go over the downtown vision and the downtown specific plan slides that
Okay,
we'd shown in the
yeah,
past.
okay, that's good. So what I'm hearing, the speaker, or what's the right term do I call the speaker?
That
call
fits. I don't think he's offended by the speaker.
Okay, thank you.
Speaker's fine.
I think that's appropriate, sir.
All right, he's looking for commitment, so maybe, I think the question was dollars, but I think progress against the plan is demonstrating commitment, so I think, when I looked at the strategic plan and the general plan, I said, okay, I kind of had the same question to myself. And I said, okay, today we're talking about parking, and I looked at that, and that's been categorized as a high priority item to get the ball rolling. So it sounds like there's a commitment to getting the ball rolling. And so I don't know what that means as far as dollars wise, but there's plans that are there. They look professional. They look good. And so the question is how do we attract more people like the speaker, or how do we help him do what he wants to do? So I think it's good, and this is a good forum for that. I have one additional comment. Kyle, you talked about redevelopment agencies, and redevelopment agencies across the counties in California, they do exist, but they exist today in a different form. They're now called successor agencies, and they're wrapping up. They're concluding all the contractual obligations that they entered into since the 70s, as far as revitalizing areas. I know that Redlands had some RDAs that go back to 1973. Well, anyways, these success energies are wrapping up, or were created because about 2012, the state of California said, all right, no more with RDAs. But out there, instead of RDAs, like the gentleman member that spoke talked about, there's different vehicles for getting funding for certain areas. Like it can be as creative as you want. And the only thing that I know that can be worked through, like a special district, through using the taxing function of the city or of any authority, the city, the county, the state. The only ones that exist that I know of right now that aren't bonds, but use the taxing function is Enterprise Infrastructure Development Districts, EIFDs. I'm not sure if I got the acronym right. And that can deal more with the infrastructure items. So I'm kind of going roundabout saying, all right, we're all looking for money. So the question is, the money is going to come from the city, and if it's coming from the city, does it mean it's tax money, or is it general fund money? Those things need to be worked out, or is it a joint partnership deal that was mentioned, like that happened on that 2-mile stretch in Sacramento? So I think this is stuff that we've got to decide as a committee to say, how do we want to address the money issue? And that kind of goes all the way back to the speaker's original question. I hope I made sense.
Yes, sir, you did.
Regarding the parking issue, we weren't aware there was a parking issue until we spoke with Kyle. None of our tenants had ever complained about a parking issue at all, so it's all news to us. So,
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily surprise me that's true, because your existing tenants and your existing buildings are somewhat, I hate using the term grandfathered, but they're existing now.
Sure.
So there's not a way for the city to force you to create parking that can't fit. So those types of businesses or those tenants are able to operate as they are now. But it's when you're looking at building a new building or demolishing a building and building a new building on the lot is where you have to come up to current code on parking. And that's where we're going to start seeing the discrepancy from how much you think you need to what the city says you need, and how much building you can get versus how much parking.
we'll discuss that today. More
Right after this.
All right, okay. I'm done. Thank you.
Mayor White.
I
comment?
just want to finish with this. the Economic Development Committee has been tasked by the council to take information like what we're talking about today. We talked about revitalization zones, downtown business authority, floor area ratios. We're going to talk about parking. And ultimately, what this committee is going to do is make some recommendations to council on how we should move forward. So your being here is very useful. I would love to see you come back if you have other
I will, definitely.
partners, or you have tenants, or you have anyone else. We're looking for as much information as we can get. So
Is this a once-a-month meeting?
it is once a month, yes, yeah. And we'll put you in touch with the couple people who are trying to establish the Association of Business and Property
Great,
Owners.
thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor. And I was going to say something even similar to that, because I'd love to see you come back, but also in working with Mr. Warsinski and his team, maybe you can come back and give us some of what your vision looks like. You know, we know that you have properties here, and unless it's proprietary, you might have, you know, some renderings or something that you'd like to share with us about what you're planning to do with those facilities, so we can get more of an idea of your vision.
Definitely. As of now, we don't have any renderings, but you'll be the first to see them once we.
Fantastic. We'd love to have you come back as often as you like.
Thank you.
Thank you. That said, at this time, we're going to move on to item 2. We'll defer to Mr. Warsinski for an update of projects from city staff.
Chairman, we're actually gonna stay on this item if that's okay with you, because
On
we still
item
have
6?
we still have the parking recommendations and
Oh,
the
yeah.
parking discussion. We
Let me
just
apologize.
combining them
You are
under
so
the-
right. Yeah.
the
You do.
larger umbrella that is the downtown. So I'm gonna go ahead and kick it over to Christina, and then she can run through the
Yes,
the
sir. My
PowerPoint.
apologies. You did say that.
Thanks, Kyle. All right. Oh. All right, so the last couple months that we've met, we've talked about parking standards and some things that we can do to help alleviate the burden of parking requirements in the downtown zone or the downtown area plan area. So the map that you see up there shows the downtown area. The green area running top to bottom is Beaumont Avenue. The dark blue is sort of the downtown core area, including City Hall, moving west and east of City Hall there. And then the extended 6th Street sub-area is the lighter blue, moving east towards Highland Springs Avenue. The bulk of the parking concerns that we have pertain to both the Beaumont Avenue area and then the downtown core sub-area. As you move further out east towards Highland Springs, the parcels get a little larger and the uses change, and it doesn't seem to be quite as much of an issue. But the committee would have the option to look at the recommendations for short-term options and decide if it needs to be applied or recommended that be applied across the whole downtown area plan or just portions of it. So the first, I'm gonna step out here because I can't see it on that, so I can read it here. The first couple options are short-term options. And so we have either waiving all of the parking requirements, of course, with the exception of the ADA that would still need to be met. And then, or we can reduce parking by a certain percentage. And like I mentioned, this could take place for the whole downtown area included in the map, or it could be applied just to certain areas. I think it would be easiest from a staff perspective to apply it across the whole downtown area plan. Just in the short term, temporary option. But we would be open to working with, any suggestions that the committee has. And then, there's always the option of additional street parking. You'll see that I've also included that on the next slide, which is long-term, options, because street parking, depending on where and how it is, may not necessarily be quick and easy to put in. So that would depend on what the committee's direction on recommendation to council would be. Then the longer-term parking options we've talked about at the committee here. Shared parking opportunities such as shared among private parties where there's agreements in place to do that, or at the city level, doing some city-sponsored parking areas, which has periodically come up as a discussion as well. The parking in lieu fee program, which would work with developers who are wanting to build something new, where they could pay a fee in lieu of or in exchange for some of their parking that would be required on site. Those funds would then be set aside to further enhance parking opportunities in the downtown. Additional street parking, again, it's on here because it could be both a short-term and a long-term fix, depending on which way we go with it. And then ultimately, if we implement the short-term parking reduction strategy, whether it's all or in some part, we have the opportunity then on the long term to permanently reduce parking or permanently amend parking standards. If we've seen that what we've done temporarily works or doesn't work, then we can put a fix in somehow. And then lastly, the discussion of parking structures has been held here. And of course, that is probably the longest term and most expensive option that exists as far as implementing and building a structure. But those are the recommendations, so I'm happy to entertain questions or further discuss.
Can you just go back to that slide one more time?
He's driving over there. There we go. I can email it to you.
Oh, great.
Yeah, or it might be on, I don't know if we put it on the website, but you don't have to write all that. Okay.
Ms. Christina, on short-term options, I understand it would be easier for staff if we just did straight across the board. That way we're not looking at different. Is it possible to do based on site visits? Because sometimes you don't really get this, but I don't know how much trouble that would be to.
So parking is based on use. And so, like, we could do it for all restaurants across the board, or we could do it for retail across the board, but site by site wouldn't necessarily, it depends on what's taking place on the site. That's what drives the parking calculation.
Okay.
So we could go site by site, but again, if a use changes, maybe a restaurant doesn't have enough parking, but if a retail store goes in there, then they would have enough parking. And so I think use-based is a better option than going just site by site.
So whether we set up short-term or long-term, everything should be based on use?
Yes, it would
Okay.
be based on use. So and the way the code is set up now, it's similar to that. So all restaurants have a parking ratio of 1 space per 100 square feet. Retail is 1 space per 200 square feet. Manufacturing, 1 space per 500 square feet. So it's sort of these general categories that how parking is calculated. For residential and for mixed use, it's a little trickier. And depending on the type of residential, so single family residential, a typical 2-car garage minimum standard. When you get into apartments and multifamily, it's a whole different ballgame because it depends on what type of multifamily, and then it depends on whether or not it's market rate or whether or not it's any type of subsidized or income-based housing, and then that's a whole different standard. So it just depends on what we're talking about.
I never realized.
Yeah.
So do you have, or have you had the opportunity yet to look at what some of the other cities near us are doing and what their ratios are that we could look at and maybe use as a reference?
Yes, so we have that both in the parking strategies study, the full study, and then in work that staff has done. And we are on the higher end overall of parking requirements. And I think that's been the case both with our old zoning code and with the few changes that took place in the zoning code with the general plan update. But it runs the gamut from like Redlands, whose downtown really doesn't have any parking requirements, up through, cities that have some flex options and some shared parking options sort of built in and things like that. So there's a lot of good information out there. Depending on what the direction is tonight, we'll pull that together when EDC's recommendation comes to to council or back here, whatever the decision is.
Last question, when you say, Redlands doesn't have any parking standards, that's for residential?
In
Restaurants?
the downtown area, yeah, so they basically done away with required parking. Redlands has a unique setup where they have the downtown, they have some parking that is in their downtown area, but they have the old mall across the
Right.
street where people are able to park and then walk right across a short, crosswalk and get into the downtown. So I think that helps. And they're, pretty booming over there most of the time.
Thank you.
So I just learned today that Redlands has approved getting rid of the mall and bringing in
Yes.
residential units there. But what do you mean when you say we're on the high end? We're more restrictive, less
Yeah,
restrictive, or what do you
we
mean?
require more parking
Okay.
in most cases than a lot of our other counterpart cities.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This topic's been something that I've been thinking about for a while, and I've talked to Christina about it, at probably more than she would like. But one thing I wanted the committee to understand is, we have two real concepts within the downtown, right? We have our existing buildings, and whether a restaurant can go into an existing building that doesn't have enough parking is one problem. But then we have another one, which is people that want to develop land that is raw, or they're going to demolish something, and then build something new, and what their parking demands are going to be. And it's a similar problem. But oftentimes when I'm working with developers, and Councilmember Laura, you'd brought this up in terms of, well, how many parking spots are you going to have for residential within the downtown, right? When they're building a mixed-use development, they know how many parking spaces they want to put on the property. So if they're gonna have 10 units in some commercial space, likeliness is they're probably gonna put on their own site plan, without the city requiring it at all, 10 spaces, one for each of those units. They may go less, they may go more, depending on the different factors that play into their types of development. But they know that at the end of the day, if they're gonna build something and they want someone to live in it, or they want someone to rent in it, and they can't park there, and they have the ability to put in the parking there, then they almost shoot themselves in their own foot. And I was talking to a developer this morning, that's looking at expanding an existing business location on some vacant land on Beaumont Avenue. And he's adding, let's just say 2,000 square feet, and he's adding additional parking. I'm like, well, we're gonna be talking about parking tonight, and you may not need that parking per the code. And he's like, yeah, but my customers need the parking. So even if the code says you don't have a need for parking, or to meet the code, a project doesn't need parking, you may find people putting in parking because their customers need it, or their restaurant needs it, or their apartments or mixed-use development needs it. It's just how do we navigate those waters when it comes to those types of developments? So I just wanted to provide that insight for what it's worth.
Thank you, sir. Additional questions, comments? Quick question, young lady, and looking forward down the road in the future, you mentioned parking structures. And I think I heard someone say we're limited in terms of how high we can build a building, 2 stories. How high would we be able to build a parking structure? Would that be the same limitation?
So the downtown area, we have, I believe it's 3 stories or 35 feet. There may be a couple areas where we can go 4 stories. I can't remember offhand, but we're somewhere in that range. Our commercial areas and transit-oriented development in other parts of the city, I think we can go 50 feet for straight commercial, but in the downtown area, we're looking at probably about that 3-story mark.
Thank you. Additional questions, comments?
Yeah, I just have a comment.
Yes, sir.
Having been on the planning commission for 8 years in the past, I just remember a lot of situations came up where parking was a big issue. And I don't know how many developments or how many expansions or how many businesses we lost during that period of time because we were not very flexible with our parking ordinances. I felt at the time pretty strict. In other words, I was thinking, I agree with Kyle. I think that, you need to listen to the businesses too, and you need to be a little bit flexible in the sense that they know they should have an idea. I mean, if they're going to be successful, they want their customers to come, not walk 2 blocks to get to their store, obviously. They want them to be able to park, but they have a sense of the traffic that's going to be generated by their store. We need to work with them. We need to have a kind of I guess, a loose structure of parking requirements. You need requirements, obviously, but a flexible requirement in that we're willing to work with the developers, the businesses, the people to kind of meet them halfway, so to speak. And I love the idea of shared parking, because I think if you build a parking spaces and they're used during the day, and if you have a business at night there, they're also used by the business at night. That is very economical. That is very smart. So I love the concept of shared parking when it's feasible. But anyway, I just thought I'd give you my 2 cents on that.
Thank you, sir. Additional comments or questions?
Just, I guess, two concerns would be, one is the state of California code requirements requiring vehicle charging stations can be a problem, I think. The other is, and I know right now we don't have this problem, but when you have mixed use, residential and commercial, I just want to make sure that we're providing enough sufficient parking for the residential units so that the residents aren't forcing potential business customers away from the other downtown businesses that also need that parking.
Yeah, and residential apartments in particular are where we see the biggest issues with parking requirements. And especially with the cost of housing in apartments now, you oftentimes have, 2 or 3 people, each with vehicles sharing an apartment, which is understandable. So it's walking the fine line with, helping a property owner maximize the site and make it, feasible for development, but also, providing enough adequate parking. The city of Rancho Cucamonga has been very successful in addressing this issue with both their multifamily in general and their mixed use areas. So we can look at what they're doing, what their code requires and how they set it up. And they just have done a phenomenal job with, in all their different parts of town, not just like the Victoria Gardens area, but throughout town where there are other mixed use properties that have developed, and they've been able to pull together some shared and or flexible parking, but also providing in a number of cases, on-street parking opportunities and other things like that within areas where the mixed use development occurs. So we'll be looking to cities that have done it successfully, and maybe some that haven't, where we say, oh, we don't want to replicate that and know what we don't want to bring back.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Hearing none. Thank you so much for your report. I'm still going to defer to Mr. Warsinski. Have we covered item 6, Mr. Warsinski?
Yes, sir, I believe so.
All right, having done so, we will move back to item 2, update of projects from city staff. Again, I'll defer to Mr. Warsinski and his team.
I'm going to go ahead and defer on this item since we've discussed this. That item took a little bit of time. We have some other major items on the agenda for tonight, so I'll go ahead and skim over this one. if that's
Thank you,
okay.
sir. That said, we're going to move on to item 3, workforce development apprenticeship program updates from Beaumont Unified School District. As I apologized earlier, Mount San Jacinto will not be here for health reasons. I've had the pleasure of meeting Ms. Aguilar, but I'm going to defer to Mr. Warsinski to introduce or her colleague here, Dr. Brown, to introduce this young lady and bring her before us so she can discuss her expertise in apprenticeship.
It would be my pleasure.
Yes, sir.
So it is my pleasure and honor to introduce Miss Susan Aguilar Martinez. who is our career readiness coordinator. And when I say our, I mean Beaumont Unified School District's career readiness coordinator. So Susan Aguilar Martinez came to us a year ago already. Really? Wow, it's been a year. And we were able to secure a grant through the K-12 Strong Workforce Partnership grant, which is a collaboration between K-12 school districts and community colleges, ours being Mount San Jacinto. And so we were able to secure a grant to fund Ms. Aguilar Martinez's position. And her role in the district is, for the next several years, because we've got an extension on the grant, is to establish internships, apprenticeships, and work-based learning experiences for students in Beaumont Unified School District. And so she has been pounding the pavement with local businesses, including our very own city here, who we have an affiliation agreement with to provide students with work-based learning opportunities. And with that, I will give it away to the very talented, multifaceted president of the Rotary Club, the Beaumont Rotary Club, president of the Best Foundation, and career readiness coordinator. And I'm probably leaving off several other hats that she wears, but to Susan Aguilar Martinez.
And while you're getting that ready, allow me to apologize. You had told me, Ms. Aguilar, you did not attach the Martinez, and I've always believed in being correct when it comes to names. So Ms. Aguilar Martinez, welcome.
Thank you
to
so
the
much.
Economic
And that
Development
has
Committee.
more to do with logistics, but we won't go into that right now.
Alrighty.
Okay, am I going to be able to see the presentation, Kyle? Yes, thank you so much. First of all, I want to say thank you to the committee for having myself and our Director of College and Career Readiness, Mr. Michael Breyer, who's sitting here, who leads our program, and I just kind of do, some of the footwork. I'd like to begin with our mission statement. There you go. Thank you, Kyle. Beaumont USC will provide high-quality education opportunities for all our students in a safe and secure learning environment through a shared commitment among home, school, and community. I like to emphasize community being our business community. We cannot be successful in our programs if we don't, partner with them. And so far, we have had a great response. Next slide. Thank you. In this slide, you can see that some of the components of our programs have to do with our career pathways, which we are expanding on. Our instructors who have trade industry, they come directly from trade, and they are passionate about teaching courses in that industry trade. And then, of course, our work-based learning opportunities within the community. Next slide. Here, as you can see, this is actually one of our classrooms that has been, it looks like an actual space in a doctor's office, which you might find, equipped with beds, chairs, and, students here do hands-on learning. We have a program of seniors that comes on board to our site, and so they've been working with a group of seniors on a weekly basis. And again, here's one of our other instructors' facilities, their classrooms, manufacturing engineering. And it looks like something that you would walk into an actual engineering manufacturing site. As Dr. Brown has stated already, our program, I was funded through a grant. And yes, my role is to work with the CT instructors and go out to the local community and establish internships for our students. So 2021, our grassroots, I basically started, grassroots with nothing in place, establishing student contracts, working with affiliates in the community, doing, all the paperwork, and then just seeing where our program was going to go and identifying business partners by, like Dr. Brown alluded, going out and really walking the pavement on the industrial side of town via visits, follow-ups with emails, phone calls, and just, numerous times and building those relationships. And as you can see, I am happy to announce that we have 15 affiliate contracts to date. They do not all have students in place. In 2021, we were restricted through COVID again. And so sometimes there were situations where we would have a business signing a contract and maybe backing off because of COVID numbers coming up. But I am happy to announce that I'd like to point out Rancho Pasil Medical Group. They actually, took the plunge and we were able to place some students there, hands-on and not a virtual situation. And then the other one would be Marketplace Physical Therapy on the other side of town. Again, they, very willingly have had our students there. And then as a recent Movement for Life, which is actually not in Beaumont, they're in Redlands, but, they have been a great partner. Thank you, Kyle. Here are some pictures of our students in the field, actually working with some patients. And I believe this is, let me see, Movement for Life and Marketplace Physical Therapy. What I look towards, what our program looks towards in 2022 and 2023 is to increase the percentage of students in our pathways and increase the participation in the enrollment in our pathways, as well as have a robust CT advisory committee made up of our local businesses, which without them, we want to make sure that we are, aligning our pathways with what is needed in the community. And then, again, capitalize on our partnerships with our local community colleges like MSJC, our businesses, other partners as workforce, our DAS, apprenticeship programs, and then increase our student participation in our pathways. Thank you. Do you have any questions at this time?
Can we go back a few slides? I just wanted to point something out. Right there, that's good. So this slide here, I wanted to point out, it's middle of the screen on the bottom row of pictures. You see and then on the right side of the bottom, a couple gentlemen with punching gloves on. This is a program that we started this year called Starting Line. And it's an exercise clinic that's actually held at Beaumont High School. It's conducted by our one of our medical teachers, medical science and technology teachers. And what she does is she's established a nonprofit organization that operates after school using student interns to operate a clinic for senior citizens in the community who suffer from Parkinson's disease. And so folks that have suffered from those medical conditions, oftentimes, and I didn't know this until we got into this about a year ago, oftentimes only get usually about 20 hours of physical therapy, and then they're kind of left on their own to rehabilitate, and it's not enough time just because the PT, the physical therapy industry is so overwhelmed. And so our medical teacher, Christine Guevara, she started this nonprofit to service our own community and our senior citizens who are suffering from this. And so it's a really neat partnership. It's a very low cost, and I think it's like $20 a session. And so they utilize boxing strategies for physical therapy. She's actually a certified occupational therapist with a master's degree in occupational therapy. And then the students come in and work with the senior citizens. And so that's just one example of not only are we out looking for internships for our students, but internally we're looking at different programs that we're bringing in to the district to not only help the community, but also provide work-based learning experiences for kids. So thank you, Ms. Aguilar-Martinez.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for Ms. Aguilar-Martinez?
The internships, are they volunteer, are they paid, or?
Currently, they're unpaid. Down the line, we are looking at how to provide students with paid internships. We're looking with our internal process as far as payroll and our Department of Business. There is quite a lot of different, components to that. And so we're looking at how other school districts are doing it, if they are. So yeah, that is something that we will be looking for down the line.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Additional questions?
Yeah, I have a comment. I'm 110% believer in internships. They not only provide real world experience for young adults, but as they move forward in their careers, it's also very important to have these kinds of experiences on their resumes, and it does help them in the future get jobs. I, for one, have a son who went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. They are well-known for their internship, apprenticeship programs up there. That's why people are clamoring to get into that university. And his experience was unbelievable at some of the internships he had. He was a finance major and he got to work in some banks and some financial institutions. That's real world experience, and you can't put a price tag on that. So anything we can do, and I applaud the school district for working with this program and expanding it, because it is very critical and important to the education of our future generation of students.
Thank you, member. Councilmember Laura?
Yeah, one of the things, we're just so proud of the Beaumont Unified School District and the success and how far they've come in this type of a program. It's a lot further along than wood shop and metal class. I don't want to date myself, but too late. But one of the things I don't know if there's any way to look into, but I know right now there's a real shortage of planning folks, planners, planning techs, building inspectors, plans examiners. That seems to be a trade or a vocation that has lost a lot of folks, especially after the last downturn in the economy back in 2008. And it just doesn't seem to have rebounded like other jobs and professions have.
So my response to that would be that when we have our CT advisory meetings, or we have a committee, we welcome local businesses. And so someone from that area, if I could get connected to anyone, we would love to have them on board so that they can kind of tell us what the challenges are and how we can then look into our programs and, like I said, expand.
Okay.
And
Keep up the
one of
good
the
work.
thing-
Thank you so much.
One of the things I will say, as I looked at your pathways, and that's big, of course, in K through 12 as well as community colleges, is that you have an area for public service, and that's going to be one of those areas. I will also, and I look forward to working with this young lady and, of course, with Dr. Brown, but we are working actively on what we called a building and energy systems professional as our first part of construction sciences. And we'll be looking at code enforcement as an opportunity for students moving into the future. So we'll see what happens. We know that there's going on in other areas, and we're trying to copy off of those and bring it out here. You took the words right out of my mouth. So proud of the work that Beaumont Unified School District is doing with these incredible professionals and bringing this brilliance to the table. And I would be remiss if I didn't at least reach out to Mr. McGuire since he came. Is there anything that you want to say to us, sir, while you're here? We want to take advantage of your abilities.
Oh, soon to be Dr. Breyer would love to
Oh,
speak.
Dr.
and,
McGuire, all right,
yeah.
Dr. McGuire, please.
Next week. First off, I just want to thank the committee for having us today. Susan, I mainly want to praise Susan publicly just for the work that she has done. The utilization of connections she's had within the community and the relationships that she's not only strengthened but built in the brief year that I've had an opportunity to work with her is absolutely incredible. And so the learning opportunities that are there for students would not be there without her work. Yeah. So Dr. Brown has laid an incredible foundation with our career technical education programs that we are continuing to invest in, most recently with our construction pathway, for example, which we got $1 million grant to put into play, and then just got another $1 million grant to expand our manufacturing and engineering program. So when you look at the growth, when it comes to actually those work-based learning opportunities, she deserves all the credit and celebration and more. So I just want to take the public opportunity to do so and, of course, embarrass her at the same time.
I'm gonna please invite me to more of these meetings. Tell me more.
Fantastic. I'll tell you, hey, look, not only are we going to invite you, but you have to make us a promise, and you've got public officials here that are witness to this, that you have to bring some of your brilliant students to share their testimony,
100%.
their lived experiences. We can see pictures, and that's one thing, but I always am encouraged when we hear from young people about their experiences and how they're learning and how they'll apply that knowledge to this community. So please, in the future, I know you'll work with Mr. Warsinski to do that, but certainly bring some of your students as they complete or move through these programs to share with us what's going on.
Well, and we'd love to extend the invitation as well. If you'd like a tour of our facilities, it's one thing, again, to see the pictures, especially with stage one of our newest expansion at the high school, which houses a number of our CTE classrooms. But it's another thing to actually be there and see it.
Fantastic.
So you're more than welcome, and
We'll
please
take
come.
you,
We'd
we'll
love
take
to
you
show
up
you.
on that. We'll take you
Yeah.
up on that. I know I can get a cup of coffee out of this young man right here.
And we are working through the process with our college and career counselor at the high school to select a board member, or I'm sorry, a student committee member for this committee.
We're
So
ready to have him back.
Yep.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, thank you so much. Any other, Mayor? Go right ahead, sir.
Yeah, I just want to build on what Mr. Lara brought up. The opportunities to work in a municipality, city, or county, and the careers that you can have are amazingly lucrative. I'm being careful here. But I think that we would like to be part of your next, when I say we, I mean our staff would like to be part of it, because we have opportunities for kids who get out of high school with a high school degree and a driver's license, and that's a minimum requirement to get a good paying job for some of the things that we do in the city. And then the city has the opportunity to provide or support in their education moving forward. I have a sophomore, my daughter's a sophomore in college, my son's a junior in high school, and I can't tell them enough times you need to go to work for a city or county. So if we could build a stronger internship program with the high school, I think there's people that, planning opportunities, public works, all of that is something that, there's a lot of good jobs in cities, so.
You'll be getting a call pretty soon.
Oh, and she will.
Call the lady behind you, because she's the one,
Bring us all your kids.
plan checks.
All the future
Yes,
government
yes.
employees.
Yeah, I'm serious about that,
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your support.
sure.
Additional questions or comments? Questions or comments? Hearing none at this time, thank you again so much for joining us. We're going to move on to item 4, the ICSC conference materials. I will defer to Mr. Warsinski because I don't know what that stands for.
The International Council of Shopping Centers.
Fantastic.
So that is
All
the conference that myself and Miss Taylor and Miss Kendrick will be attending in about a couple weeks or so. So I wanted to showcase a couple of the items that we have planned for that conference. And also I'm gonna do this first. All right, so perfect. If you can bring this up on the main screen. So what this is what people like me call opportunity site profiles. And what that means is if I'm going to be out there meeting with different developers that develop commercial sites or tenants that we're trying to attract to the city to go into different sites, we need to actually have sites for them to go to or to develop, right? So we create these opportunity site profiles that showcases the land that's highlighted right there in the center, in the yellow, 36 acres, retail zoned. It provides you an idea of the different tenant mix within that corridor. So luckily for us, within the area surrounding this 36 acres that's available for development are a lot of national big name tenants. And so that way, if they're not familiar with Beaumont, which I would be a little bit surprised if they're not familiar with us, but if they are not, they can see their competitors or they could see other benchmark retailers within that corridor. And then they can kind of go verify with their own sources what their sales look like, what their visitors look like, and so forth. It provides a quick snapshot on a retail trade area population, gives them an idea of what the average as well as median household income levels are, provides a little bit of information in terms of what makes this property enticing or attractive, and then provides population within the trade area within 5, 10, 15-minute drive, and then provides contact information. So it doesn't give them a lot of information, but what it does is we have a couple minutes sometimes. Sometimes you have 10-minute meetings with some of these people at the conference. It gives them enough for them to be interested. And that's really what our goal is with these site profiles. If we hook them, they're interested, they'll call us for additional information. They'll definitely want to drill down into our demographics. So that's one of them. The other one is across the freeway on 6th and Xenia, so where the swap meet is, and the other vacant land behind the Applebee's. It's a very similar area. It's a private landowner, and then they have a lease agreement with the people that operate the swap meet, but the people that operate the swap meet do not own the land. They're looking at selling those 20 acres. So for that one, they're not looking at developing it, they're looking at selling it. So that page will be used for people that are looking at purchasing and developing land.
What are you selling 20 acres for?
The dollar amount?
Yeah.
I don't know off the top of my head, but I could definitely get you in touch with them on it. It's a pretty good piece of property, but obviously I'll let you negotiate the price.
The 36 acres, is that for sale as well?
Yes. It's not, some of these are not actively listed though.
Okay.
So it's ones that I know who the owner is, I know they would be willing to sell it.
What's the $100,000 figure in the bottom left corner?
That's the average household income within the trade area. So within this polygon here, the average incomes for an entire household is over 100,000. So this is another site profile that we have for Oak Valley Village, which is the commercial shopping area across from the Chevron and across from Sand Trap and Domenico's out there off Oak Valley Parkway and Interstate 10. We include a conceptual site plan on this property because this one was actually entitled at one point in time in the past. And there's certain, not entitlements, but certain things that may remain pertinent and valid for the development if it was configured in such an orientation. So we provide that on there so that a developer or a future owner gets an idea of what a shopping center might look like. And when we have more information, we provide that on raw dirt that has nothing. We're void of that, so we simply don't add it. And then another one on Penn and Third. So that kind of gives you an idea. Go ahead.
This is Chris.
Yes.
I'm just trying to tie back some of the parking considerations that we were talking to. We were focused about downtown. If there's any parking changes on those options that were presented, let's say like eliminating parking requirements, for example, does that also apply to these types of developments?
So
Would that apply? Or could you parse it out or segregate it somehow?
well, within the idea is that we're looking at parking restrictions within the downtown area. So most
Right.
of these and most large commercial shopping centers don't fall within the downtown area. The one I have highlighted on the screen actually does, but it's on the eastern end within that 6th Street mixed-use continuation zoning. But one of the main things and why I emphasized it is, say someone buys this and say the city Economic Development Committee recommends to council that we waive all parking requirements in the downtown and see how that goes. And council takes that recommendation and approves it. If they build 20 acres of land and say it's a big store, and we don't need to name a store, but just think of one you really like to go to, you better believe that store is gonna want parking for their customers. They're not gonna cover the entire 20 acres of shopping center that they paid good money for to not have parking for their customers. And that's really where I think Christina and I call it right sizing the shopping center, where the shopping center is right sized for that type of development. We don't have a vast parking lot that is empty 362 days of the year. You see it full on the other one. And if you can remember back a little bit, we had a parking variance on the Cinema West movie theater because our parking code said you need this amount of parking spots for this amount of seats. And they came back and they said, well, we operate 15 of these things across the state of California. None of ours need that many parking spots for this amount of seats. And we were able to ask council for a variance or planning commission for a variance on that item. And I haven't personally experienced an issue with parking on that site since. So you can imagine that larger developments that will occur within the downtown will be providing parking. It's just gonna be more of a right-sized concept to each plan that comes through versus going by the book on what parking standards need to be per square foot.
Right, that makes sense. My inclinations from the hearing, what I've heard so much so far about parking is that developers are going to do what's right, or a different version of right sizing, but they're going to do what's right. And so to even alleviate seeking a variance, if we go with the no requirements mode, then that just makes it easier for people to, that's one less thing to worry about if you're going to develop, let's say, that plot over across the street from the sand trap. So I like what you're saying.
Yeah, and just so we're clear, it wouldn't extend to the one across the sand trap because that's not in the downtown, and that development, if it would move forward, would need to park per the current code at the time. Same way with this one at the 36 acres. So that's a quick intro on opportunity sites. And then the only other thing I wanted to bring up is something we're working on. We're trying to create one of these for each of the different opportunity sites. So we're going to be presenting people somewhat of I would call it fairly sophisticated drone footage that overlays the logos of each of the businesses that are active within the area on the buildings. Because it's one thing to look at buildings from a drone, and it looks nice, and you can kind of fly over different areas. But it's another thing to actually have the brands on there, and I think it looks pretty nice. So like for this one, for example, that 36 acres is over there behind the Verizon, right? So I'm going to stop this and make it so it doesn't spin anymore. But the 37 acres is over there. And on this current slide, I can't move. So what we're working on doing is having it look very similar to this, but also having that 36 acres highlighted in a different color on here. So it's impactful when I'm meeting with a person that's looking at developing, that we can bring this up and then show them a bird's eye view of the area. They get a kind of good feel about it versus just a simple piece of paper. So we're working on putting these together as well.
Questions or comments for Mr. Warsinski? Great presentation. Great presentation. Questions or comments? Questions or comments on Mr. Warsinski's presentation? Hearing none, then we can move on to item 5. Thank you for that again. Great presentation. Item 5, City Economic Development Website Design Contract. And again, I will defer to Mr. Warsinski for any introductions.
Thank you, committee chair, members of the committee. Before you tonight, we're going to talk about really the results of a review of who's best going to design the economic development website that council has approved funding for in the last budget, and is part of one of the key components of the economic development strategic plan is increasing our web presence and being able to help businesses find resources, help site selectors find sites, help businesses that are looking at moving into the city find those locations, people helping looking to expand and those types of things. So we started down a trek of looking at who can design websites, and we immediately went to our first thought, which is the city's current website designer, and that their name is Civic Plus. You probably are all familiar with our city website, but if you're not, I'm going to go ahead and pull it up. Community code, there it is. All right, let me know when this is showing on the screen. There we go. I love this picture too. It almost looks like an economic development website. But this picture rotates, so it's not always the cinema on the city website. But this is our city website. It has all kinds of department information, has business resources, it has information for city services regarding sewer, social services, street sweeping schedule, CFD Melrose information, trash and recycling, has community events and so forth. So it has a lot of information on one page. So if a site selector looks at this page, they go, okay, I want to look at where do I find economic development stuff? So they may go to business, they may go here to economic development and click on this, and then this brings up that page. So Civic Plus is really good on doing city websites. In fact, they're one of the leading providers of website design and a website platform for cities. So we reached out to them and got some quotes on what it would take to go a little bit more in depth and more user friendly for an economic development themed website. So here's one of the examples I have for them. So it has a little bit more on it, but this is still a city website. It's not an economic development website, but that was one of the key examples that Civic Plus provided me. Where's another one?
I think we've lost.
Oh, that
vision.
wouldn't show up?
We can't see it, yeah, we can't see
Oh,
it.
you're probably trying not to have me look at. That's okay. I'll bring up all three of them while we're loading. There we go.
There we go.
So Gulf Shores, Alabama, pretty nice looking website. It's a little bit more user friendly than ours currently is because that's how they've designed it. But at the end of the day, it's designed as a city website. When you click on, let's say economic development, right? Brings up a very similar page pattern that we had on the last one, which was ours. See how the left side's the information, you have a potential for a picture, information that goes down and so forth. And that's really Civic Plus's bread and butter, is that's their format, that's their structure of their websites, and that's where most of their websites find their design to be laying in. So Laguna Hills, very similar. It's their city website. So you can kind of see that, but if you click on any of the government tabs and you go over and try to find, here, let's go to community development, right? See how the format is very similar? It's very similar across all of them. And Frisco, Texas is another one where they have the departments. What I found interesting about Frisco and what I thought was, I really like their splash page here. They have a little bit different idea of how to do it. But when you clicked on their economic development website, it popped up this, and I was like, whoa, what is that? Civic Plus does this, I want this. And what I learned is that this is a separate website hosted by a different company. And in fact, it was one of the companies that I was researching. It was just funny that Civic Plus got me on Frisco. Then when I clicked on economic development to see what it was one of the people I was also looking at. So that's really the Civic Plus platform. And then one of the other platforms that we looked at is an economic development website design company, and they're called Golden Shovel. And this is one of their products. And so you can see on here a little bit of the differences, right? This is only an economic development website. This is for, I believe it's the Orange County Business Council, right, which is very similar to was it, IEEP within the Inland Empire. This is the Orange County version of that. So you can see on this website, it's a little bit more interactive. When you click on any of these, it kind of brings up a different looking web page than that Civic Plus model, and you're able to customize these individual pages as you see fit. Different layouts, different pictures, different things to click on and for people to look at. Where's another one? So Eagle Pass, this is the cities. Do we want to, we should have signed up, huh? If I'm going to use their website, I should have signed up for it. So you can see on these types of websites, they're able to do this design with location advantages, interactive maps, featured news section. I'm going to go ahead and look at their site selection tool because I had talked about that as one of the components for EDSP. So Eagle Pass has a site selection tool on there, and then you can kind of go on here and click on it. And then it brings up what building that is, and you can request more information.
So it's showing you the buildings that are available for rent or lease?
Yes.
Wow.
And Civic Plus did not have that capability embedded within their site. You're able to do it a little bit different, where if you're familiar with how websites are designed, you can kind of embed another website into that panel, and then when you click on it, it brings you to another one, but that came with it a different cost. And then the last one, I thought this one would be good to show. It's kind of one of these splash pages that has, I forgot what they call this. It's kind of a video, but it's like a, I'll get back to you on what it's called. It'll come to me in a minute. So Golden Shovel was pretty good in terms of what they can provide. You can see how the language in here fits the need of what the city's looking for. The website design is free and oriented towards a site selector, corporate executive, and so forth. So the last one is Edie Suite. They're also economic development, marketing, and website design company. Kind of get an idea of what their work product looks like here. So throughout my training and talking to colleagues in my profession and talking to site want to be able to access the information very quickly. They want to know where it is. They want to be able to find it. So this is Edie Suites property portal. Similar to Golden Shovels, although the map is a little bit more interactive. You are able to change for sale or for lease. So you can do that. You can do this only, and then it just populates ones for sales. If you click on it, it brings up this information and so forth. And then this should go to a listing page, which is where someone that's looking at buying that property now calls Jessica, and then Jessica and them can discuss terms and price and so forth. So that's one of them. In fact, the Frisco one I had brought up was an Edie Suite product, and then this is one that I looked at as well. This is a very small city in Washington County in Texas. They have a nice interactive splash page, simple information here on lifestyle, showcasing different types of food scenes, the downtown area, and so forth. So really those are the three that we looked at and compared and contrasted. So the pros and this is the way I think. So I went through, I looked at those types of things. We received their proposals. and I'm not gonna get into all of them, but we had different pros and cons for each, right? So Civic Pluses was a cheaper platform. The website design was cheaper, the hosting cost was cheaper. We'd also have a single hosting platform across the multiple websites we have here at City Hall. So a little bit easier to maintain. The Civic Plus platform did have a limited site framework, and then they actually don't provide content writing. We would have to formulate and create all of the content, which are the photos, videos, wording, and language contained on every single slide within the website. So Golden Shovel, one of their major pros is economic development oriented design. You can see that based on the examples. They do provide content writing, so they get with the city, they understand what the city wants to accomplish with the website, where we want to go with it, and then they, with our input, write the content for each of the web pages for a certain price. Cons of Golden Shovel was just the higher price of design than Civic Plus, and then they had a higher annual hosting cost. So lastly, ED Suite, economic development oriented design. They do provide content writing. They have that integrated property search portal that I showed you that was a little bit more sophisticated than the Golden Shovel one. And then they also provide a photo consulting service where they're not taking the photos because they're I believe in Texas. It wouldn't make sense for the city to pay them to fly out here to take the photos, although they could. But we have sourced 3 or 4 local photographers that specialize in commercial photos. And what ED Suite can do is basically just consult with them on, hey, this is how the website design is going to happen. This is what I need the shots to look like, so that the content, the design of the website, and the photos match up. And the real only con I found with EDC is just the overall price of the design. So I wanted to bring this to the committee. If the committee is okay with it, city staff is looking to recommend to the city council to hire ED Suite for the economic development website design and hosting. The cost associated with the website design is $16,000. The ED Suite property, so that property search function, is $3,000 as a one-time fee. And then the content creation to actually have them write the marketing firm or marketing content. They have professional creative writers that design economic development websites. That's not my forte. I believe I'm good at certain things, but creative writing is not one of my things. So they have a price for that, and then their annual hosting costs is only $4,000 a year versus the Golden Shovel agency is more than double that for annual costs after the website is established and up and running. So that concludes really my run through of the different websites that we were looking at, and kind of the thought process related to staff's review of that and what we're thinking of recommending to the city council.
Questions or comments regarding Mr. Warsinski's presentation? Outstanding presentation. Questions, comments?
Yeah, I was going to ask. I guess nobody's monitoring that. Yeah.
Member Ahmed?
How large? How much content are you talking about on the website? Like in the form of pages? Because there's an element of design part of it that's cost, and then also there is the amount of content and how much space it requires, right? So those are the driver for the cost.
Yes, sir. The initial concepts, what we did was we envisioned what the splash page would look like, and I think ultimately we would really like one to look like the Brenham ED with that interactive video at the splash page. It may not be that when it first launches, because we need to cull the video. We need to be able to video Cherry Festival. We need to be able to video 4th of July, those types of events. But ultimately, the number of pages across the top will be similar, maybe 6 or 7 tabs across the top, and 5 to to 7 tabs within each of those. So roughly around 50 total pages, just at first glance. And I have talked to them about how economic development departments work. And sometimes we come up with a crazy idea and we create a new program, which to me might earn itself a new web page. And I said, well, we're gonna have to pay extra for that. Are you gonna be able to help us writing the content for that web page if we're able to move with it with you? Is that gonna be included in our $4,000 annual hosting and assistance cost, or is it gonna be extra? And they said, no, those types of things will be extra. If you want a whole new website, that's or included. If you want a whole new website, you want a lot of different things, that'll be an extra cost. But a couple different pages every year because we're establishing new programs or changing programs is not an issue for them.
So thank you. I'm not sure what you found through the process, aside from the quality of the content provider and developer. From what I hear, 4,000 for the hosting annual, if that's a measure, seems a little high. So I don't know if you want to explore any further. Other than that, I mean, their work seems to be high quality, looks good.
Sure. I mean, the way I looked at it is Civic Plus was giving us a discount on their hosting because we already have 2 websites that are hosted on their platform, and their hosting cost was $2,800 and some odd change, but that does not provide 24/7 support, and it did not provide training. Training was extra per hour on going through everything. So that to me is probably the base price on what hosting cost. If we're getting a group deal and it doesn't include training and support, 2,800 is probably the cheapest. So the difference between 2,800 and 4,000, I didn't believe was that high. But
Yeah, that not much.
the difference between the 2,800 and the other firm was significant.
And you're going with the ED Suite?
That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I was very impressed with the way that any business from outside would be able to come in and do their research with regard to properties that are available. I think that is very impressive. It's going to save time, and it's going to make us very visible to outside stakeholders who are interested in possibly coming to the city to do business. It saves them time, and if they can find something attractive here, they know exactly what to contact you on.
Yes, and that's the goal of the website, is to be a one-stop shop for businesses that are looking at coming to the city or ones that we already have here. And sometimes we have different incentives, or we throw out grant information on our city website, and after a day it might get lost or through the mix, where if you always tell them it's gonna be on what the economic development website's name is gonna be, that's where you go. Every time you want information, go on there, and then they have it bookmarked and they can click on it and hopefully be able to find it a little bit easier.
Fantastic. Additional questions, comments regarding Mr. Warsinski's presentation? Questions, comments? As we get ready to leave that area, if you're ever down in Gulf Shores, they have the best alligator tail in the world down there in Gulf Shores, Alabama. So just so you know, great stuff. And you'll run across a couple of those live rascals walking across the highway, without a doubt. We at this time will then move on to reports. Thank you, Mr. Warsinski, and to your team. We will move on to reports from the committee. Are there any reports from this committee? We've had a really good meeting today. Any reports from committee members? Any reports from committee members? Hearing none, then at this time, we will move on to topics for future agendas. We have a number that have been added here, including intro to new business program, RCTC passenger rail program, 2022 retail market analysis update, WRCOG CPACE program, downtown lighting, and business license application process. Do any of our committee members have any recommendations for future presentations from this list? And of course, keep it in mind that we can continue the discussions that we've had today with regard to our downtown business and landowners to promote business growth that we discussed under item 6. And we will be bringing back Mr. Oxford next time from Mount San Jacinto, as I had shared with Mr. Warsinski. He is in quarantine, COVID-related, and certainly we didn't want him to get out. We want him to get well. And so he called me this morning and said that he is in lockdown. Any recommendations from this list? This is a great list. I personally, and this probably shows my age, would be interested in the RCTC passenger rail program. Love trains. And the idea that we would have that type of service from this area would be outstanding. So that if there's some information that we can gather, that would be great. Yes, sir, Mayor.
Yeah, I would like to suggest that in the next, preferably the next meeting, is that we put together a timeline of when we're going to report back to council regarding the downtown business ideas that we're talking about. We don't need to do it in the next meeting, but I think we've got an idea about parking. We need to come up with some financial concepts, and we're probably going to miss the budget process at this point. But if we are going to look at some of the things we talked about, revitalization zones, maybe coordinating with business owners for some kind of funding source, those kinds of things, we need to get those. We need to not have an open-ended discussion. Right. I think the discussion could continue for a long time.
Yes, sir.
But I think we need to report back to council soon with, give us some direction. Here's what we're thinking.
So I think the good thing with the way the funding request for economic development is set up based on the last budget workshop and what we'll see next week at the next budget workshop is it's sort of a blanket amount at this point. And so I think we won't necessarily miss the budget. We'll have some good opportunity if council approves the budget in June to then bring several options for council to decide how they want to utilize those funds based on what we've heard over the last couple of months and then what we may hear also in June. So when the budget's adopted and July 1 kicks in, then sometime, July is still 2 months from now, we can be working on that ahead of time. So if we're ready to hear some programmatic information or ideas for discussion, we can bring that in because we know the funding is likely going to be there. So that I don't think has to wait terribly long. As far as parking and floor area ratio, which I know we didn't get to tonight, staff's happy to bring some of these recommendations to council whenever we're ready, whenever this committee decides or council's ready to see it. So
Let me ask procedurally to Mayor White, are you requesting that we consider maybe a working meeting in our next?
Well, I'm thinking if we set a timeline, even if the timeline is 5-6 months out, just something, because the way I'm envisioning it, we're starting to talk about many different opportunities, and maybe that's where you start assigning 2 or 3 people as a subcommittee to sort of to, one to look at parking and then determine what other cities are doing and other ways to look at some of the funding ideas and what other cities are doing. So that we can bring that back to the committee and then bring it to council. But I think if, multi-month plan is what I'm thinking of. But just something so we have a game plan.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Right. I'm certain Mr. Warsinski will reach out to us, the individuals that you'd like to work with you on smaller groups or.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and prepare the timeline that the mayor is requesting, and then also, I don't know if we want to, I think the timeline's a great idea. It's really up to the committee on, do we, as the committee, feel comfortable making recommendations on possibly parking now? And then obviously continue to work on the timeline on some of these other items that are gonna need more research, or are we not quite there yet on parking, and then parking is on the timeline as well for future meetings? it's really a sense of urgency and a sense of comfort level with, does the committee have enough information from staff that we've provided to the committee to make a recommendation on parking, or are we on the fence, if you will? Because I would prefer not to make a recommendation to council if we're still on the fence as one member of the committee.
I think the question should be more, do we want to recommend to council that we direct staff to look at all the opportunities? Or do we want to look at the opportunities here and come to council and say, here's our suggestions? I'm okay either way, but I think that's the kind of discussion we would develop in some kind of plan or timeline. Okay, we can break it down by, the parking, the floor ratio, the funding opportunities. How do we do what Mr. Leonard brought up here?
Absolutely.
And how do we make a commitment by council that we're ready to, we want to send a message that here's how we're going to do it. And, right now we have considerable amount of one-time money that we're going to be deciding what to do with at the budget process. And at this point, I don't think we're in a position to say, the money that we want to set aside for economic development is mainly, in my mind, the economic development program that we have here. But it's not money that we're gonna set aside for an actual investment into something we're doing downtown. So we're gonna miss that opportunity at the budget level to say, hey, maybe we need a fund that will allow businesses to better develop because we're going to support them and help them. And so,
Yeah, that's a much larger, like, philosophical conversation to have before we go down that road.
and that could
So,
be part of a one-year timeline.
yeah,
you know?
definitely.
And
Okay.
that's sort of what I want to get people to
Yeah.
think about,
Yeah.
is, how do we continue to move this forward?
Right. Okay. Yeah, we'll develop that and bring it, and then, at the next meeting, the one drawback with EDC is because we do only meet once a month, if we can meet with subcommittees in between that time, that helps keep things, moving, a little quicker, so we don't get stagnant just too long with waiting for decisions or recommendations.
Yeah, nothing more than an idea, maybe suggestion, and building upon what Mayor White has already said. Because he said it could go either way. Personally, again, in the interest of playing, our position and my position, I would defer to the expertise in the Economic Development Office and your team in terms of bringing us some concrete
Yep.
ideas that if we're required to vote on them, that we could make those recommendations to the council. We already know that we need to make changes to parking, and I think you all have done an admirable job of reaching out to the business community, inviting them into this environment, but as well working with them directly in the community to gather ideas and thoughts. I'm hearing a recurring theme amongst all of them in terms of being able to assure that they have space for customers and space for people who are gonna move here to reside, especially in this young man, Mr. Leonard, and talking about the mixed
Yeah.
building. So, certainly, I would defer to, if I had to, the Economic Development Office, to say to us, look, this is what we've gathered, these are the thoughts, these are the ideas. This is what would be beneficial for us immediately, even if there's some changes that come down and everything changes. So we know that we have to be fluid oftentimes when we make plans. We do the same thing in education consistently. But certainly to make some firm recommendations is part of our responsibility to our elected officials and to our council. So because I don't want to say the wrong thing, I like parking structures, man. And I like to charge when you have parking structures. You should throw $1 in the till, so we can pay for this thing. I don't have a problem with that, but some folks probably would, so I wouldn't want to say the wrong thing, right? Yeah, so I would defer to the experts in this.
We will bring back some, information for comparative value that will help
Yes,
make the right decision or make the right recommendation and go
absolutely. And
from
then, of course, the timeline that the mayor's talking
Yep.
about, I agree with him. We've got to see an end at the end of this tunnel. And, of course, do the work that we've been charged to do.
there. Yes, sir.
Christina, this is Chris.
Yes.
when a recommendation goes from the committee to the council, is that recommendation in the form of a motion with all the attending, let's say, legal language that would be needed for, let's say, a parking regulation or parking policy change?
So typically how it works when a commissioner or committee makes a recommendation to council is staff has presented information to the commissioner or the committee. It's been discussed, and then someone does make a recommendation on what, or someone brings up what the recommendation should be. You all would vote on that, and staff would take that information, formalize it, put it into a staff report for council, including the information that EDC recommends such and such, and the vote was this. But staff would then also be doing the legwork behind that to prepare any associated documents that would need to be accompanying the staff report. So like a zoning amendment or
Right.
a change to the general plan or some policy statement, et cetera. We would, as staff, would take what the EDC decides here and turn that into something concrete that then the council could take action on.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds good. Any additional questions or comments?
This is Chris. I have just one more.
Yes, sir.
Kyle, you brought up the website, which is great. And then we talked about a future agenda item dealing with like the new business permit process.
Yes.
In my brain connected the two because I can't imagine a permitting process that cannot be web-based. So should we be solving the permitting process simultaneous with the scope of the website?
I think that we may have a section on the economic development website that has the permits and applications, but considering that there's so many of them for different types of uses, right? And I think the best place for those types of applications is gonna be under the business license system or under the planning department on the city website. And if you search for those on there, you should be able to find those fairly easily. Where if those, it's just gonna add a lot of content to the economic development website where economic development is more about business resources and business attraction.
Right. Okay.
Obviously, if they call me, I can help them get to that other stuff, but, and then the discussion on the docket for a future item is, the way I understood it is having staff research the business license application process to see if there was a way staff could streamline that and still accomplish the necessary requirements and goals that the city has for a business license.
Okay, that sounds good.
Additional questions or comments? Additional questions or comments? Hearing none at this time, we've gotten down to the point where it's time for a motion for adjournment. I'll open the floor.
Move to adjourn.
I second.
It's been moved and properly second. We're not obligated to vote at this time. We're going to adjourn the meeting of the Beaumont Economic Development Committee at 5:59 promptly p.m. Have a wonderful evening. Please stay safe.
Thank you, everybody.
No, it's not shorthand. I'm not.